We're up to Daf Nun Hey Amid Aleph, the beginning of the Amid. So we said that according to Rav Meir, if you perform Me'ilah b'shoigeg, it does not mischal the animal, but Me'ilah b'mezid does, makes the animal profane. Rav Yehuda is the opposite. B'mezid does not, b'shoigeg does. So says the Gemara, Tanan Hasam, there's a mission in Shkolim. The Mishnah says like this, Behema, and that's what this daf is going to be about. It's about this Mishnah. Behema shenimtzas miyushalayim migdal eder. If you find an animal that's roy for a carbon, so you find a cow, a sheep, between Yerushalayim and the city of Migdal Eder, which is near Beis Lechem. So it's right outside Yerushalayim. The point is, you don't know what this animal is. Because we assume it came from Yerushalayim, and the majority of animals in Yerushalayim were set aside as a carbon, or it's similar distance from Yerushalayim in any direction. We treat this animal like a carbon, and therefore, if it's zacharim, if it's a male, oila, you bring it as an oila, because you assume it's an oila. And kevis, if it's a female, so it can't be an oila, zivche shlam, we bring it as a shlam. Now, the Gemara has a kasha. Zacharim oila sudahave, zivche shlam lehave. Here's the problem. Let's say the males, right? It could be an oila, could be a shlam. So he said treat it as an oila. But why? When you're not sure what to do, it's not like you could bring it as a carbon, because if it's a shlamim, it should not be burnt on the mizbeach. If it's an oil, it should not be brought as a shlamim. So how do you just decide what it is without knowing? So the Gemara says like this: Here's the case. You're not actually bringing the animal itself, because the animal itself, we don't know what it is. Case is where you want to transfer the holiness onto cash. You want to be mechalel the behema, to transfer the holiness onto cash. B'mezid, meaning you know what you're doing. And so this is what it means. Meaning, what you do is, the animal, the male animal might be an oil, might be a shlam. So you can't actually bring it. So what you do is you transfer the holiness onto cash. So here's what you do. Let's say the animal's worth $200. You bring $400, 200 and 200, and you said, if this animal is a shlamim, then then there should be a shlamim. If not, and if it's an oil, it'll be an oil. So you bring, and then you buy with that money. You buy an oil and a shlamim, an optional oil and an optional shlamim, in case it's not. Now, this concept that you're taking the money, the animal, and being mechalit and transferring the holiness onto cash, b'mezid, knowing what you're doing. Rav Meir, it follows Rav Meir, damer hegdish b'mezid mischalo. Rav Meir, who felt that if you do me'ilah b'mezid, it profanes the animal. He is the author of this Mishnah that feels that you could transfer the holiness onto cash b'mezid. Now, there's a couple things the Gemara says. Okay, so it follows Rav Meir, because according to Rav Yehuda, if you do it b'mezid, by me'ilah, the animal is not mischalel, so we have no source that you could transfer the holiness b'mezid. So therefore, this Mishnah follows Rav Meir. Now, there's a couple problems here. First of all, Kedushas aguf mi mischalel. Even Rav Meir, you're assuming that he would feel that you could transfer the holiness of an animal that's complete, that's unblemished, that has Kedushas Haguf. Meaning there's a thing called Kedushas Damim, wherein the item is not roy to actually be used in the Beis HaMikdash, but it has the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash, meaning it's dedicated, like you could take a table and say, it should be dedicated to the Beis HaMikdash. That, I agree, Rav Meir feels that you could transfer the holiness b'mezid. But now you're extending it to a carbon, a full-fledged carbon. Who said that Rav Meir would feel comfortable with that? But not, isn't there a Mishnah that basically indicates that Rav Meir would feel that you cannot be mechalel kedushas haguf, something that's actually fit to be in the Beis HaMikdash, like an animal for a carbon, or a klishares, cannot be nischalel. V'atanan, the Mishnah says, ein moil achar moil b'mukdashin. See, generally you can't have two me'ilas, right? Let's say you have a table that you set aside for the Beis HaMikdash, so it's kedushas dam. If you use it once, it's profaned. So there's no me'ilah, there's no second me'ilah, because by the time the second person wants to use it, right? I use it for my personal use. I'm over this me'ilah, but I profaned it. It's no longer holy. Then my friend also used the same table. It's not me'ilah for the second guy because it's no longer holy. But there is a category. Ela bebehema klisharis bulvad. There are two cases. Hold on one second. The only two cases that you could have me'ilah one after the other is with a behema, an animal that's roy for a carbon, and a klisharis. Why? Because there's no way to profane it. Meaning, you're assuming before that Rav Meir would be comfortable with a person profaning, transferring the holiness of an animal that's roy for a carbon, an animal unblemished. That's not true. An animal that's unblemished, you could have multiple milas. I'll give you an example. You have a sheep that's roy, a cow that's roy for carbon. I ride on its back, so I'm over this mila. Then my friend writes, he's also over this mila. Why? Generally, there's no mila after mila because the first time you use it, you already profaned it. But it's not by Kedushas Haguf. An animal that's roy to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, you cannot profane it. So how could you say that this Mishnah that says that you transfer the holiness onto cash is Rav Meir? I thought this Mishnah, which we assume is Rav Meir, Stam Mishnah Rav Meir, this Mishnah seems to say that you cannot transfer the holiness. You can't profane an animal that's roy for the carbon. Ketzad, let's say you're riding on a cow that's roy for the mizbech. So you're over this amila. And then your friend rode on the same animal. And another one. Kulamol, they're all over this amila. Because again, the animal is not profaned. If you're drinking from a golden cup, meaning a klisharis, so you're over this amila. And then your friend drank from it. And then your friend drank from it. Kulamol. You're over this amila multiple times. Why? Because the animal is not profaned. So how could you say that Rav Meir holds that you could transfer the holiness of an animal that you can't bring because you don't know what it is, but it's a fully fledged animal? B'mezid, you could transfer the holiness. I thought the animal cannot be profaned. So the answer is Ahi Rav Yehudi. That Mishnah, which says that you cannot, follows Rav Yehuda. Rav Meir feels that you can. Okay, so the Machloikes, Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda, is whether you could profane an animal that's roy for the akrav. Now here's the problem. Mid Rav Yehuda, Nishla Rav Meir. Lavam Rav Yehuda hegdish b'shoygig mischalel kedushas aguf loy mischala. Rav Meir nami avagav de hegdish b'mezin mischalel kedushas aguf loy mischala. Here's the problem. You have no source. Yeah, Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda are arguing about whether if you use hegdish kedushas hadomim, whether it's nischal b'shoygig or b'mezin. It's machlokes. We have no source that anyone would say that you could profane Kedushas Aguf. So you have a Mishnah that says that you cannot. You say, oh, that's Rav Yehuda. And you could assume Rav Meir disagrees. Maybe Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda are only arguing about Kedushas Damim, but when it has Kedushas Aguf, when it's a full-fledged animal, maybe everyone agrees. Why would... Again, we know Rav Yehuda is arguing, again, he feels shoygig. It is Nischal, not B'mezid, but he's arguing only in Kedushas Damim. So you're assuming that Rav Meir, not only does he argue about Shoygig Mezid, he also expands it to Kedushas Haguf. That even animal like Kedushas Haguf also be Nischal. Why do you assume that? So the Gemara says, Hasam loika mechabin lafkin luchulin. Hacha mechabin lafkin luchulin. The reason is because, the reason why Rav Meir's Shita expands more. Because Rav Yehuda holds that there's only, again, what's Rav Yehuda's Shita? There's only Me'ila b'Shoygig. Meaning, you could only profane an item b'shoygig, and that's only by kedushas damim. I'll tell you why. Shoygig by nature means that I am not intending to do so, right? Shoygig means that I'm accidentally doing it. But the Torah says that when you accidentally use it, it becomes profane. Rav Meir feels that there's only chilul b'mezid. But when you're doing it b'mezid, you're intending to make it no longer holy. Therefore, Rav Meir is comfortable extending that to kedushas haguf. Meaning, Rabbi Yehuda, his shita is that there's only a chilul by shoygig. You're not intending to do anything. The Torah says if you use it accidentally, it automatically becomes profane. So you understand why the Torah would say that that's only true by kedushas hagdamim, not kedushas haguf. An animal that is roy for that krava, you can't just automatically profane accidentally. But a meir shita is you're doing it b'mezid. If you're doing it b'mezid, the assumption is it is automatically profaned because your actions you're trying to profane it. That's the difference. Okay. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. So now you're saying, so this Mishnah, which says that you're profaning an animal to either be an oila or a shlamim, it follows Rav Meir. Now I know that Rav Meir feels that you could profane a kachikachim, which is an oila. How do you know that he feels that you could also profane a shlamim, which is kachim kalim? So the Gemara answer is very simple. It's a kavachomer. Kachikachim is chalim, kachikalim like kachikalim. Well, if you're able to profane a kachikachim, which is the holiest, then of course you could profane kachikalim, which is much less holy. Itmanami, the Brisa similarly states, Amar Rav Chama bar Akiva, Amar Rav Yossi bar Chanina, Amar Ayer Meir Hegdish Meizim Mischal b'Shagalim Mischal Echad Kachikachim Echad Kachikalim Kavachimer Kachikachim Michalim Kachikalim Kalshikin Kavachimer. Go to the next page. So you're saying that this Mishnah, which says that you bring the animals in oil and a shlamim, it doesn't actually mean you bring the animal. It means you transfer the holiness onto cash, and it falls from Meir. So Rabbi Yochanan was wondered by this. Isn't it an avera to do this? Meaning, if you have an animal that's roy to be brought in the mizbech, it's osir. Yeah, so Rameir feels that it's possible, but it's still osir. The Gemara in Menachos brings down psukim that you're not allowed to do this. So you tell me the whole case of the Mishnah is we're telling you to basically do an avera. How you talking? Doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara says, Elam Rabbi Yochanan, you know what the case is? You're not actually transferring holiness onto cash. It's mamtin le'ashatoimim. Here's what you do. You have this animal, you don't know what it is. You bring two animals in front of it. You wait for the original animal to get a blemish. Umaisi shtei behemis. Then you bring two animals. Umas, then you stipulate. You say, if this original animal is a shlamim, the animal on the left is a shlamim, the animal on the right is an optional oila. If this animal is an oila, then the animal on the right is a chiyav oila for sure, and the one on the left is an optional shlamim. So you actually wait for it to get a blemish. Then you transfer the holiness, not onto cash, but onto animals. Now, fine. So you're not actually bringing the animals. You're not actually transferring the holiness of an unblemished animal. You're waiting for it to blemish, and then you're you're transferring the holiness onto animals. Okay. The point, I think, is not the cash as opposed to animals. The point is you have to wait for it to become blemished, and then you transfer the holiness. Hold on one second.
Recordings.
Yeah, so the point is, it's not animals. The point is, you wait for it to get a blemish. Then you're allowed to be mechalet according to everybody. You transfer the holiness, and then you buy with the money two animals. You transfer the holiness onto cash, onto the cash that you have. You buy two animals, one for oila, one for shlam. Okay, fine. Now, from here to the end of the daf, we're just going to analyze this mission. We're done with the discussion related to us. Now we're just going to analyze why we assume that if it's a male animal, it could be an oila or a shlamim. Right, those are the two options. Amar Mar, Zacharim Oilis. Dilma Toidahi. What about a Toida? Maybe it's a Toida. Right? That you bring when you, instead of a Goymel, they would bring a carbon Toida. So that could also be a male. So instead of oil and shlam, it should be oil, shlam, Toida. The answer is the Ma'asin Amta. You're right. You'd have to bring three. If you want to be Yoitz L'Choladeis, you'd have to buy three animals that have the same value. One for an oila, one for a shlam, and one for a Toida. Habayi Lechem. Doesn't a Toida need bread? Maisinami lechem. Yeah, you'd have to buy bread as well. Okay. Dilma Asham who? Maybe it's an Asham. Asham is a little more complicated because, you can't bring an optional Asham, right? Every carbon, what you're doing is you're saying, if this is an oila, then it's an oila. If not, then it's an optional oila. There's no optional Asham. So how do you know it's not an Asham? So the answer is, it's a special case. Asham ben shtei shaman. Asham has to be a sheep that's 2 years old. In the case of the Mishnah is where you find an animal that's only 1 year old. So you know it's not an Asham based on the age. Okay. But it could still be a shlamim, an oila, or a taida. But maybe it's an Asham Nazir or Asham Mitzayr, which are 1 year old. The answer is Lishchiach. That's not very common, so you don't have to worry that it's an Asham, the Asham of the Mitzayr, Asham of a Nazir. I Dilma Pesachu, maybe it's a Karm Pesach. The answer is like this: Manavshach. Pesach Bizmanim is a Zarbe. During Pesach season, when it's a Karm Pesach, everyone's careful. You don't lose your Karm Pesach, and therefore you don't have to be concerned that someone lost the Karm Pesach. Shaloi Bizmanai, and if it's after Pesach, then Shlomu, the halach is that Karm Pesach, not during Pesach time, is brought as a shlamim. So you already got shlamim covered. I dilma bechar or meiser. No, maybe it's a bechar or a meiser behema. Now here's the thing though: bechar and meiser, there's nothing you can do about it, because let's say it's a bechar, and it had a blemish. So what are you going to do? You can't make another bechar. A bechar by definition cannot be transferred. The only thing, and this Gemara points out, the only thing to be careful is that if the original animal was a bechar, once it gets a blemish, the halacha is you're allowed to eat a bechar that has a blemish, but there are certain stringencies. You have to treat it with a certain level of kedusha. You can't measure its meat in the market. There's certain stringencies that you need. There's certain levels of kedusha that is needed for bechar. So the answer is you're right. You would have to treat this animal that has the bechara. You have the original animal that gets a mum. Then that you eat that. You transfer the holiness, then you eat it. You're right. You'd have to eat it with the stringencies that perhaps it's a bechar, which has certain levels of stringencies that need to be met when eating it. Okay. Yeah. You can't shecht it in the market. You can't sell it there. Can't be weighed on a scale. Okay, so you have to be careful. Now, that's all if it's a male. Now, if it's a female, you said shlomim. We bring it as a shlomim. So, whereas dilma toidahi, perhaps it's a female toida. The answer is, okay, you're right, toida also. You'd have to bring two animals, one as a shlomim, one as a toida. Aiba nelechem, what about bread? You bring bread. Bring bread as well. I dilma chatas, maybe this female goat is really a chatas. The answer is chatas bashnasa v'shtaka b'sheshonim. The opposite answer we had before. That the chatas has to be 1 year old. This animal that in the Mishnah's case is dafka where the female was 2 years old. Okay, dilma chatas shav mishnasa. Maybe this chatas, maybe this animal, it's a 2 year old animal, but it's really a chatas, and it taka was consecrated before 1 year old, and they didn't bring it, meaning it's chatas shav mishnasa. It's a chatas that aged out. Maybe it was a chatas, but it's just they didn't bring it for a year and a half. The answer is lo shchiach. That's not very common. If you have a chatas, you usually bring it right away. Okay. So the case is where it's a 2 year old animal that you found, because if it was 1 year old, it could be a chatas. Now, what happens if you find a 1 year old animal? So then there's a possibility it's a chatas. So what do you do? So Tanya, bring it as a chatas. The Gemara says, "L'chatas, look at that. You bring it as a chatas. You don't know that it's a chatas. You don't know that there's a sin. Like, how do you bring it as a chatas? It's elam Rabbi chatas. You treat it like a chatas. Meaning, instead of, let's say, the case is you have this animal, you let it get a blemish, and then you transfer the holiness onto cash, and you buy a shlomim, and you buy a toida. Now we're saying that one thing else you have to do is the original animal. You have to treat it like a chatas that cannot be brought, which is you don't eat it, you let it just die. You lock it up in a pen and let it die. So that's out of the concern that perhaps it's a chatas. That's what you do. I will stop here and pick it up tomorrow.